Hi, Teresa.
Hello.
How are you doing on this beautiful but hot day?
I'm doing good. Totally forgot to correct you, but it's pronounced Teresa.
Teresa, I'm so glad that you corrected me. Awesome. Okay, Teresa, I got you. I got your back. And
Thank you.
never be shy to correct your name because, boy, when I lived in the south of France and the French pronounced my name triche, which is the French word for cheat, I said, nope, it's Trish. And thanks for trying.
That is so funny. Why were you in the south of Greece?
No,
Or
south of
France?
France. I was a student in the south of France for a year when I did my undergrad. It was a poor kid dream come true because I somehow made that happen. But Teresa, before we get to, like I said, I don't want to divulge into this is the Trish hour. This is the Teresa hour. What generation do you identify with, and what year were you born?
I was born in 99, and there's a lot of debate on whether my year is Gen Z or millennial, but I feel like I lean probably more Gen Z.
Okay. Well, what makes you say that as opposed to millennial?
I don't know. I grew up with social media already being a thing. Like once I was able to have a phone and stuff, I had an Instagram and all that. I think as far as attitudes go, I'm definitely Gen Z.
Well, can
I
you
don't know,
unpack that a little
social
bit?
justice warrior stuff.
Oh, what was that?
Like social justice warrior stuff. That's usually categorized with Gen Z.
Oh my gosh, I muted myself. Hello. Sorry about that. What I was trying to say was that's really interesting that you say that because as a Gen Xer, we use social media from the minute we could to be social justice warriors, sharing, punk music and going to shows and debating about 9/11 and whether or not we should have gone to war and all that kind of stuff. Plus, it was a Gen Xer that created not only YouTube, blogging, but also Twitter. Not a Gen Xer, I guess it's Gen X in general. So it was actually my generation that created these platforms that we went into 100% as let's talk about shit. Let's see what's going on. So, do you think that people say that it's more of a Gen Z thing because the things that you see on social media are only from Generation Z?
Yes and no. I think, of course, what I see on social media is definitely altered to be like an echo circle. So I'm talking to people around my own age and all that. But I think it seemed to be more of a thing now because it's popping off. Like, you respect a process. Like you said, you guys created this whole platform to begin with and started out with 80s punk and all that. But I feel like anything else, improvements are made, things are filtered out, things are put in, et cetera, et cetera. And then, of course, like right now is when we're like, oh, this is the best. But I think it's fair to respect a process.
Okay. Well, and just to be fair, punk music was carried into even modern days. So it wasn't just 80s punk. I think it was the
Oh,
punk
no.
ethos that I was referring to. But yeah, that's it's interesting you say we've had a few guests on the show talk about social media being an echo chamber. Do you tend to, is that pretty much your experience, is that you tend to stick within your generation, or have you because Black Lives Matter, for instance, that was started by Gen Xers. Do you ever follow those kind of social justice movements, or are they particularly Gen Z? And if so, if they are particularly Gen Z, what are some of those social causes that you follow in particular? If you don't mind sharing with us fogies, old fogies.
Well, I follow the Black Lives Matter, also the Me Too movement.
Also started by Gen X.
Yeah. I don't follow what generation the starters are a part of. I don't know. I follow more of what the movement's about.
Yeah, okay. So, and I'm only bringing that up, Teresa, because you had said that, Gen Z tend to be more social warrior. So I guess I was really curious what it looks like from your perspective to be a social warrior. Maybe you can help unpack that a little bit. Explain what you mean by that.
Like advocating, showing up to marches, spreading the word, the news. I don't know. My siblings are millennials. I'm the youngest. And I feel like that wasn't really so much a conversation during their youth as it was during mine. Like when I was in high school and all that, that's when gay marriage was legalized. So I remember a lot of like talk and like school rallies and stuff like that about it.
Yeah, that was a big deal. I remember texting my best friend and being like, "Oh my gosh, you and Roxy can get married now!" Like it was a really exciting time. So, wow, that's really great. So, are you involved with? Do you go to rallies and have you been involved with protests?
I've been involved with a lot of the Black Lives Matter protests. I'm doing a social work major right now, or I'm in the process of getting one. And one of like the competencies is you have to advocate for your clients. So this semester I'm doing an internship, and I'm going to have to find a way to advocate for my clients.
Well, that's really neat. So, as someone who did a lot of protesting against the Iraq War in the 2000s, when you show up to protests, are you surprised by anything in particular? Like, what is the general feeling? Are you surprised by how large or small? How is there one generation that is more visible than the others, or genders or races?
I think that is completely subjective to like what the protest is for, and like where it's located. Like when I was living in Flagstaff, we would not meet anything that's like similar to DC or like a Phoenix size. But I feel like also location definitely affects the vibe too, because in Flagstaff, if we all got together for a rally, it was like, not a rally, a protest. It was all like we knew each other, and it was more organized that way. Like we would make our posters together and all that. But I feel like it's harder to organize on a big scale, like in Phoenix and stuff, where I think that's easier for things to get out of hand. And yeah.
Well, I saw that you had an NAU email address. I did my undergrad at NAU, and I concur that when you're involved with a community like Flagstaff, like my listeners know that when I moved there in '94, that was when I was like, I went vegetarian. I brought my own bags to the store. I didn't have a car. I was supporting local businesses, like, because that's just everything about Flagstaff is about social justice and movements in general. So I totally love the fact that you got involved with that. When you moved to Flagstaff, were you a different kind of person? Did Flagstaff change you, or did you already kind of lean into that kind of world before you went there?
I think I was kind of leaning towards that kind of world, but Flagstaff totally did a 180 360 on my personality. I don't know. That's where I really learned how to cohabitate with people that maybe you really don't like, and learned how to make friends, and I learned how to participate in a community, which I really liked up there. Just because I grew up in Phoenix, and there's not a lot of community in Phoenix just because it's so big. But Flagstaff, it's like you're going to run across the same place and people over and over again, and be nice to everyone because they'll show back up in your life sometime.
Yeah, we used to say that that every social identity or group was completely involved with the others. So in the 90s, it was like you had your punks, your ravers, your hippies, and your maybe not so much your frat kids, but every once in a while you'd have some fraternity or sorority people kind of mingle into the art scene in Flagstaff. But it was just really like that, where it was just so fluid, almost like gender fluidity. Like we definitely had like a large group of us girls that we all shaved our heads, but we left our armpits and our leg hairs long, and like
Oh my
there wasn't
gosh.
there wasn't this it's not the same. Like I've lived in Tucson too, and I noticed that although there's like a pretty big punk rock like bicycle anarchist collective group that's down there, it's like the love child of Phoenix and Flagstaff, right? Tucson is.
Yes.
And but it still wasn't like, it was almost like these two groups shall not like intermingle, whereas Flagstaff, and that's why my heart still lives there after all these years. I haven't lived there since 2001 when I left after I graduated, but it definitely left this impression on me that, like, you're right, I've lived in Phoenix now for almost 7 years, and I can't quite find my place here. Like
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like it's so big, and I know there's so many counterculture things happening. So what has that been like for you, leaving Flagstaff and coming back to Phoenix? What kind of a culture shock was that for you?
An incredible one, especially since it's so hard to find. Well, I'm an outdoorsy person, so you could mingle in the climbing community, the hiking community up in Flagstaff. I'm just having trouble right now finding like good, healthy ways to meet friends.
Yeah, totally. I mean, and there is a lot of hiking in Phoenix. Like I definitely I've done more backpacking and kayaking than when I lived in Portland, for example, because I'm
Wow.
super outdoorsy too. But yeah, I like how you said healthy, which is really interesting that you would say that, Teresa, because I said your name right, right?
Yeah,
Because you'll correct me if I ever mess it up again, right?
it might slip over my head, but
Oh, okay,
I'll
okay,
try.
okay. But now that I know it's Teresa, I shouldn't ever make a Teresa.
Yes, yes.
Teresa, not Teresa.
Anything
Oh,
but Teresa, really.
oh, okay, perfect. Yeah. Well, so kind of go back a little bit. It's so interesting that you really emphasized healthy ways to meet people, because from an outsider perspective, your generation is the healthiest generation I've ever seen. I mean, it seems like everyone's going to the gym, everyone's eating, drinking smoothies, making their own food, like all the things that were super, Flagstaff punk rock in the 90s. You guys kind of do as like everyone seems to do. Can you kind of go a little deeper into what you mean by like quote unquote healthy? And do I have it wrong? Do I have the vision of what your generation is wrong?
I don't think you have it wrong. I think people are, I don't know. I feel like mental health awareness is probably what my generation has focused more on, rather than like health in the sense like smoothies and hikes. Of course that they're all interconnected, but with that being said, I feel like my generation focuses on healthy living in a more psychological sense. And that's kind of what I refer to, because if I'm making a friend at a bar, like the only thing we know we have in common right off the top is that we both like drinking and having fun, which isn't really bad, but that's going to be like the focal point where you have to start from. Where rather if I like met someone like out on the trails or out on the rocks and stuff, we both start off like on the point that we have this like common activity that's healthy. And that could be even be like art, that could be music, but yeah, I don't know. I just feel like we're everything that our community is. We reflect often, even if we were like, oh, we're very individual. The only way you could have a sense of individuality is like the people around you. So I'm very, very, very particular about who I spend my time with and what we're doing when we do that.
Yeah, that's so interesting because I don't know many Gen Zs that actually drink. So to hear that you like go to a bar and drink like that is that's really different than not that I know like millions of Gen Z, but I do work in a university and my my staff are Gen Z, and through the podcast community, I've made friends with a lot of Gen Z throughout the world. And so, and none of them are drinkers.
Whoa.
So I'm really surprised to hear that. But is that that's kind of one of the questions I wanted to ask you was, what does it look like in this world that you guys have known your whole life as social media? What does it look like to hang out? And maybe you're not maybe you're the perfect person to ask because you did some studies up you've lived in Flagstaff, which is it's like, I feel like your experience in Flagstaff is literally the exact same as mine, even though 20 years separates it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But like, yeah. So what does that look like? Are you super social? Like, when you were going to bars more, were you doing that like every other day, weekly, once a month? I mean, what does that look like?
I would say like on average, like once a week. And yeah, I don't know. I feel like socializing is a big factor that goes into me going to bars and stuff.
Oh, and it always has been. I mean, let's be honest.
Yeah.
That's literally why they were made, is so people could socialize. I mean, because they were around before the telephone even was, right? Like in the, late 1800s, or even before that, I'm sure.
Yeah. There's
like in the Middle Ages and stuff.
Yeah, there's this theory on why humans decide to settle down, like stop doing the hunter-gatherer societies and start doing agriculture, and it's called beer theory. It's
because that was the first farming that we did. Yeah, my brother loves to talk about how everyone says it's wheat that made us farmers, but he was like, no, it was barley. I love that. I love that you know that. How did you know that?
I'm a weirdo. I don't know. I'm a nerd. I spend my free time trying to learn stuff and watching my history, anthropology documentaries and stuff.
Yeah, good. Yeah, that is the best. I mean, and how amazing was it to grow up with Google? I mean, by the time you were using it, it's like when I was using it in the olden days, it was not the Google that you know today. I mean, it was really archaic and hard to, I mean, it worked, but it sure wasn't the amazing, like, I love being able to like watch a movie and be like, oh, I want to look up Rock Hudson, or like whatever, like this director, or like who's in this and why do I recognize them? Like, do you find yourself doing that a lot when you're watching movies or TV?
Sometimes I don't really follow a lot of the celebrity stuff just because I'm really bad at remembering names. I'm like, oh, it's that one guy. But I feel like when I'm watching like movies from like an earlier time period or a different place, I'll be like, oh my God, what is that food? And then spend 20 minutes on Google trying to figure out what they're eating in that scene. Or
Yeah, yeah. Well, like
yeah.
Rock Hudson, for instance, he's an actor that died in like 1985. He was the first celebrity to ever come out with having AIDS and died of it. And so, yeah, that's what I mean. Like, I'm like, oh, I wonder if that's who that is. And then you just go down this rabbit hole, this wormhole of like all of these things, which is like so amazing. So you never actually went to a library to look up books to do your papers for school, did you?
No, never.
Yeah. So we have a mutual friend, my niece Megan, because she's marrying into into my sort of family, which I always put quotes around my brother, but he's my oldest friend. We've known each other for over 30 some odd years. When she was on the podcast last year, I told her about the card catalog and the Dewey Decimal System, and she was like, I don't even understand these words that you're using. And I was like, wow, that's so wild. Like, that's in my lifetime, that's gone from the only way to find information to completely obscure and just gone, completely gone. Like, that is so amazing. And I'm sure any listener that's in the older millennials and older can appreciate that, like, yeah, this is a really different experience to have grown up completely and 100% online. So a lot of people worry that because of your exposure to being on social media so young, I'm sure you know this because you sound like you're a very with it person, but that it has really caused the increase of teenage suicide, as well as just the diminished self worth and things like that. Because you're studying in that kind of sort of world ish, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I have a couple actually. And they're just opinions, no facts.
Well, I think that's what I didn't ask, like the doctoral, chair of Yale to come on to talk about this. I'm literally asking for opinions. That's what's so
Yeah,
beautiful about a podcast is
yeah,
having random people come on and be like, well, this is how I view the world, right? Because then it helps
yeah.
us all kind of, I don't know, just share the experience.
Learn how to listen. It's good.
Yep.
Um, I think that just from like a monkey level, like we're supposed to be interacting with each other in person through facial like expressions. Like I feel like a lot of communication is body language and things that aren't exactly like words, you know? Um, so I feel like socialization still needs to be like centered because we're not happy when we're not being social. And even though it's like on a screen, it's manufactured kind of.
And it's not give and take, right? There's not an exchange happening in real time usually.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it makes us less focused, less mindful of what we're doing in a like moment. Um, just because you're doing homework, that thing's buzzing, you're half in that conversation, half in what's happening in front of you. And I think that makes your brain confused, honestly. And I feel like we get celebrity syndrome when we're on social media because it's a 24/7 performance. Like it's normal for humans to perform time to time, but then you go in your cave and you rest and cache all that useless stuff that happened and then go out and perform again. But social media doesn't let us have that real time to just like unpack and be alone.
Right. And it doesn't allow for us to actually disconnect for long periods of time. So I love your analogy, by the way, of like performing and then going in the cave. And, so many people barely even sleep a whole night through without checking their phone. And, and it's the first thing that people look at when they wake up. And the last thing they think about or look at before bed. Whereas like you didn't always just go in your cave to sleep. I mean, you might have gone in there to relax and rest. So it was a lot more than just like an 8-hour period of like no socialization, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. So I love that you're with that. Do you find that you're a minority in your generation, or do you think that feels this way? Or do you feel like there is a shift? Because, one thing we do on this podcast is we kind of, while we're trying to destroy ageism, we still want to kind of examine people within their age groups, and then we can tear that down. Does that make sense? So we're putting things in pockets just so that we can rip the pocket open. But, the whole celebrity culture and social media culture and like posting. I remember the first time I ever saw someone post their food on the internet. I was like, what the fuck? I thought that was the weirdest thing, because that wasn't what my generation was using social media for. Again, it was to rally for protests or punk shows or, debate, social matters and politics. And then along comes this generation that's like, look at my shoes, or, like, isn't this a cute, like, vegan scramble? And of course I got swept into that. I mean, actually, I didn't even want to have an Instagram page for the longest time, because I just was so fed up with this platform. Like, it just was coming so quickly from the first one that I had in 2001 that it was just like, I don't want to keep doing these things. But do you feel like there's a shift now the other way, where it's like your generation may be trying to move away from those sort of platitudes of what social media kind of turned into in the last 10 years?
Yes and no. There's definitely subgroups out there that are like trying to get off the social media. I think I'm an outlier as far as my generation goes, but I think ever since that documentary came out, what was it called?
The Social Network.
Yes, ever since that came out, I heard more people being like, oh, I want to get off social media. But I actually got off most social media like a couple years ago. I lost my phone in the Nevada sand dunes.
Nice. That is exactly where you should lose a cell phone. That's awesome.
Exactly. And I was really broke at the time. So I was like, oh, I'm going to have to get money in order to get a phone and figure all this out. And I was off my phone for a couple weeks, and I was like, yeah, I just want to not have that in my life. I was so productive. I was so in every moment. I enjoyed everything I did so much better, just not having the option to check the time every 2 seconds or see what's up with their group chat every 2 seconds. So to this day, I'm trying to stay away from it, but I'm entering this new dilemma where a lot of the professional field is on social media.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm in this like weird, like I'm trying to walk this tight line where it's like, what is a healthy amount of social media that I could have versus in correlation to being a working human being in this society.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. When I took 2 months off of my podcast, I really used that time to just sort of like not really be on social media anymore and like maybe jump on and look at stuff every once in a while, but definitely not producing content because obviously with a podcast, like the only way people are going to know about you is if you market it, right?
Yeah.
And I got into this whole thing with one of my Gen Z mentors that was like, okay, we can create this whole marketing scheme for you. And it was like, the deeper we got into it, Teresa, I was like, oh, the last thing I want to do is put this much energy into getting more downloads and more followers. Like I was just like so overwhelmed that it was like, I don't think that I really care if I really have like a, $20,000 or sorry, 20,000 download podcast if it means that I have to devote that much time to social media. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I can see, and I also see it in my job where, there's now workshops that like parts of my department do for other universities to teach them how to have a better social media presence. And I'm just like, ugh.
Whoa. Whoa, that's so weird.
Yeah, yeah, it's definitely here to stay for sure. Well, okay then, what is your preferred social media platform? If you only had one that you could keep or the one that you kept since you said that you're kind of you kind of went away from it for a bit.
I kept Snapchat just because it's
Whoa, your
like,
generation still does Snapchat? I thought
yes.
everyone was on TikTok. And I haven't heard anyone talk about Snapchat in like a couple years,
Oh
which
no,
was
I need to stay off
such a
TikTok.
fun.
It's
It's
too
such a
addictive.
fun. You need to stay off it, you said? Is that what you said?
Well, yeah, I cannot get an account. I got an account for like 2 days and wasted like 2 whole days on TikTok. I can't,
Oh
I
yeah.
can't tune out of it.
TikTok is like, and I love that it deals with the algorithms of the things that you're interested in because mine's all social justice warriors. Like they span from the LGBTQIA plus community to like Gen Xers that are like trying to make sure, like, hey, you guys, we were here too, and we were here first.
Yeah.
And like to like all of these amazing Native American TikTokers that have these awesome pages. And I don't know, it's just, and then I talk to other people that are like, yeah, I just get girls in bikinis by a swimming pool dancing. They're like, Trish, there's nothing social justice about TikTok. And I'm like, oh man, what are you watching in your spare time that made TikTok think that's what you should be interested in? I'm just saying. Like, your phone doesn't lie. It's that
Yeah.
interconnected.
I would have a healthy mix of both girls in bikinis and social justice. TikToks if I had a TikTok.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, that's pretty crazy. So did social media do you feel like your desire to kind of be without it, did it affect you negatively growing up? Or is this just the Flagstaff zeitgeist where when you're involved in that beautiful mountain air and those crisp blue skies and those beautiful aspens that are golden in October, do you feel like that's what kind of made you not be so into social media, or did you have like any bad experiences growing up with it always in your face?
I don't think really either.
That's a
I
great
think it
answer.
was easier to, huh?
I said that's a great answer.
I feel like I didn't have any bad experience growing up with it, thank God. And Flagstaff was definitely a nice place to get off it, but I I just like made that decision as like I said, I didn't have like any money, so I was kind of forced into it, and within a day I was like, yeah, this is how I want to be. I just forgot this was an option.
Wow. Well, yeah, because you technically have never been exposed to that option.
Yeah. Like what? I have to sit with my own thoughts for a second.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that is, there's, a long running joke, and those of us that are Gen X and older always say, and that is like, we're so grateful that social media wasn't around when we were coming up, because we were just like, we were able to, like you said, be so much more in the moment. And even if people were like busting out like cameras, like even if they were like disposable cameras, everyone would be like, oh man, like, don't take a picture of this, like,
Yeah.
because it killed the mood, like if everyone's sitting in a circle and they're like, maybe they're just like smoking pot and pontificating about the expansion of the universe, because that's real shit that happened in the 90s in
Oh, that
Flagstaff
still
for
happens.
sure. Oh, okay, just making sure. um, but then, to have someone jump up and break the circle of consciousness to take a picture of all of us doing that would have been so invasive,
Yeah.
like spiritual rape almost, because it's like, why are you trying to exploit this moment? Did you ever feel that way, where you were like, God, can we just not take a picture of this sunset? Like, can we just be inside of it?
Yes, totally. And I I like traveling as a hobby. And I run into an issue where it's like I have like two pictures from a trip and then everyone's like, "Oh my god, did it even happen?" I'm like, "Yeah, I was gone for like 2 weeks."
Yeah, it's terrible that that's such an embedded psychology, or mental view of the world, is like, if it's not posted, it didn't happen, and it's like,
Yeah. Or if I
how
did an experience, like I can't trust someone else's account of their experience. You know?
right, or just like, instead of like like, there's the other side too, right, where it's like, I have friends that will post like, 36 pictures of their trip, and it's like, listen, none of us wanted to look at your slides or pictures back in
Mhm.
the day, then like five tops, like, let me be able to take a look at it for a second and get a gist. I'd rather hear the story. I'd
Yeah.
rather you tell me what it smelled like or how it felt like, or like, yeah, that's cool. But also too, and being like a huge nature buff and traveler myself, I've always said that like, your camera's a traitor because it doesn't translate what you see. Like, every picture of the Grand Canyon is busted, because when you get to the right, because when you get to the Grand
Get
Canyon, you're
used to the
just
word
like,
busted.
whoa. Well, hey, my generation's been using that term for a while,
I
so.
love it. I love
Um, but
it.
yeah, you know what I mean though? Like, you get to the Grand Canyon, you go, damn, that's not at all what I was expecting. That like weird vertigo feeling, and just this like vibration of the rocks as the sun's setting and the colors change, and you're like, oh, it's really far away, but it's close, and you can see the different sort of angles of the rocks. I mean, you can't get that out of a photograph.
Yeah. No, you can't. You really can't. And I don't know. I feel like on the subject of using social media as like recounting like a little journal,
Right.
um, it's so nice getting out of the loop that you need feedback for absolutely everything.
Wow. Yes. Yes. I love that you said that. You don't need feedback about how beautiful your dinner is.
Yeah.
And we've
Or how
all
beautiful
said
you
that.
are. Like
Right.
I I don't know, I feel like it's good in the sense where it's like we could be more connected to people where it's like hard to be connected to people like distance and stuff like that. But like distance and solitude is like very, very healthy.
Yeah, it definitely is. And it's also like, I really don't like liking pictures of people that post themselves, because I feel like I'm encouraging that behavior, when it's like, I don't want to take a pic. I don't want to like a picture that you're posting on social media, because I don't want you to think that's the only thing that I'm going to like on your page.
Yeah.
And actually, I kind of, and sorry to all my friends out there, I kind of go out of my way to not like it, because
Yeah.
I don't want to encourage it. Like, I'm not someone that puts a lot of myself on, and my Instagram page, when I started it, was 99.9% my adventures of just like a picture or a few of like an adventure I took. But rarely would I have pictures of me, and it's really prevalent in my generation, these like, hashtag fabulous and 40, and they're like slutty looking, and I'm just like, whoa, like,
Ooh.
can we not revert to like, I only feel fabulous if I'm showing my cleavage or my underwear, and like, can't we just be
Ah,
like fabulous and 40 like me, and I'm just gray haired, and yay.
well,
here's
how about
here's my new
this?
band t-shirt.
How about this? You take a photo dressed in whatever you want just for you and have the ability to not just show it to someone else to see how you look. Just
Right.
look at it and be like, oh, I look good, you know? Because that's the
Bravo.
only affirmation that really truly counts at the end of the day.
That's right. That's right. I hope
Um,
everyone out there heard that, because that is absolutely 100% true. It doesn't matter how many likes you get, because you're probably going to have a friend like me that's not going to like it, just simply because we don't want you to think that your only validation is this picture you've posted about yourself.
yeah. And I feel like, as far as the word, I I don't think that nudity or any of that is like really an issue though. And I think the word slut objectifies women more than performing in quote unquote say slutty behaviors.
Aha. Okay. I'm so happy you said that, because there is definitely the difference in our generations is that you guys are very concrete about when you hear a term, it triggers you. And I appreciate that, because it allows my generation to go, okay, let me explain to you what I mean by a slutty picture. If the picture is such where the woman is placing her body in a suggestive manner is a, that is 100% known as a sexual manner,
Uh-huh.
and they're doing that for everyone else to look at. Slutty may not be the correct term, but it still bothers me as a feminist that that's how we want to portray ourselves for likes. So I feel like there is something wrong with that. I really applaud people for, we don't want to body shame, and we want to have body positivity. But there's a part of me that thinks that there should be a line, though. Like, there's certain things that I feel like we don't hold sacred anymore. And I feel like we allow this almost pornographic mentality to be on display on social media, that women like me who really have tried to fight all these years to redefine what being a woman is, I just feel like we're going backwards in time. Do you know
I
what I
think
mean?
there is especially on the topic of sexualization and participating in sex, I think this is where feminists from my generation and your generation tend to butt heads a bit, because there's kind of a double edged sword as a woman. It's like you could take pictures in your band t shirt and go through life and not that interested in sex or displaying yourself as a sexual person whatsoever, and you're called a prude. Then you respect your own sexual health and go out, have sex, or even present in a sexual manner, and then you're a slut. So, but there's no way, like both of those instances do not apply for men. So I feel like making more rules around sexual expression for women is just creating a different box to put them in and isn't really liberating them.
Interesting. Yeah, I definitely respect what you're saying about that. I think the point really being more, and I was never called prudish with refusing to show more skin, I guess, in my Instagram. I don't think the world's quite that black and white. So I think it's more of a, and this is why it's so great to have a podcast like this, because I can have people like you on and have this conversation. Because I think what is damaging is when we tell another generation what they're thinking or saying and what they mean instead of asking. Because when you say that we're putting women in boxes, that's like definitely not what I perceive. That and it sounds like to me that you're the one that's kind of putting us in different places, because you're like, this is why our generations are butting heads in feminism instead
I
of
didn't even
saying,
say that in a confrontational way. I'm just saying,
oh no,
like,
I
I've
didn't
had
take
this
it that way.
conversation with my mom where we both consider ourselves feminists, but it's interesting to see how time has affected that, and I wonder where that conversation took a turn. You know?
Yeah, and just for the record, I didn't mean to say that you were confrontational. It's just the way that you approach it. You're already singling us out. Does that make sense? So with your words, saying this is how our generations are keeping feminism from moving forward, which is not bad or good. It's just that's interesting that's where almost where we're ending the conversation. It's like, oh, well, your generation looks at feminism this way, so we can't really, it's kind of your fault that we're not moving forward or
Well, no, I didn't say any of that. I don't think that it's a matter of moving forward or backwards. It's just an interpretation. Like, we're looking at the same goal. Like, I'm just looking at the feet and you're looking at the hands, you know?
yeah, okay, so how do we start to look at the whole body instead of getting hung up for 10 minutes on each other's verbiage? How do we get every generation, because one of the big things of this season is I'm trying to unpack ageism, and how do we come to the table and instead of like, oh, this person's of that age, so this is going to be their view. And I don't know if you have an answer to this, but how do we get, if because I mean, imagine, right, if we could get all women on the same page, then we could really maybe move the needle in a much faster and more dynamic way. Would you agree?
Yeah. But I think respecting like intersectionality and like what I mean by that being like there's like what you're saying, like there's different factors like the black girl and the white girl are going to go through different experience of feminism depending on race. Like there's other factors like that, age, location, belief that go into it where I think a lot of where it would just look like a different thing for everyone. So I'm trying to think of how to explain that better.
By the way, you made me sound way cooler than I am, because I definitely didn't bring up race in terms of feminism. So,
Yeah.
but that is such a great point. So I'm glad that you brought that up, because there is a whole other realm of what gender identity is, that's even brings in people who identify as female that maybe not were not born female, and that's a whole other part of feminism and the conversation that needs to be included, right?
Yeah, totally. Totally. So I feel like each person, according to their own groups and experiences, have different catered needs that need to be addressed. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And so I guess at the end of the day, my ask to all of our listeners and each other, you and me both, is how do we move the needle for women and those who identify as women in a productive and powerful movement. And I learned something today. I definitely should not disregard women in my age group that now have discovered their sexuality and want to post it online. Still feel a little uncomfortable even saying that out loud. I'm not going to lie, because I feel like sexualization of bodies is like, it's so hard to not see that as such a big part of why we're not moving forward in the fight against equality. But I definitely enjoyed having this conversation with you about that, because I like to think of myself as very empathetic. And wow, you just definitely made me think about some things. So I really appreciate that, Teresa. That is why we have to have conversations with people in different generations, for sure. But at this point, we have gotten to the part of the podcast where we are going to do our rapid fire questions. Teresa, are you ready for that?
Yes.
I am so excited to ask you these questions because I never know what's going to be answered in non-Gen X groups, any other generation, right? So the first one being, what's your favorite memory from childhood?
Mine's a little goofy. My next door neighbor was my age, and our dads were trimming trees, and we both got these sticks and literally played with sticks together for like 2 years after.
2 years. Oh, that's awesome. That is
Sometimes they were
special.
swords. Sometimes they were like Gandalf staffs.
Well, yeah. I mean, you're speaking to someone who represents a generation of only having, we had to be outside from like the minute the sun came up to the minute the sun went down, and everything was, up for grabs. We didn't always have access to like our toy boxes outside. So I love hearing that. Do you have a favorite 80s band or musician? And if so, who would they be? And you can say, I don't like any of that music. That's totally acceptable.
I love all that music. I'm a sucker for the oldies.
Oh, it pains me that you called that the oldies, because my generation called like Chuck Berry and Ella Fitzgerald the oldies.
I like oldies too.
It shouldn't be two, though. That's like a 40-year difference of music, genre-wise and everything. But whatever. I digress.
I feel like Queen would be my favorite if I had to choose one.
What do you have a favorite 80s movie?
Was Pulp Fiction 80s?
Nope, that came out in 1994, the year I went to college, because I saw it in the theater next to the NAU campus.
Then I have to say Risky Business.
Oh, okay. Nice. Did you go to NAU because I saw your email address. So you did go to NAU?
Yes, I am currently on my last semester, but since it's all online, I reckon I would save and rent and do it down here.
Oh, okay. Yeah, smart choice. Why did you go to college then?
Honestly, because it was the next step. I wish I took gap years after high school.
Oh, years. We only ever talked about a gap year, but now, yeah, maybe taking a few years off would.
Oh, yeah. You don't really know that much about yourself at 18, and definitely not even now do I know exactly what I want to be doing, what I want my purpose to be.
Teresa, I changed my major 7 times. I had no business going to college right after high school.
Me too.
Oh, man. Well, and Teresa, this is my favorite question to ask. If you had a bit of advice for anyone in any generation, older, younger, or your own generation, or all of the above, either to get through the bad times or just life advice in general, what would you say?
I think it's... Have you ever heard the concept of a favor bank?
Ooh, I feel like the words give out what that means, but I'd love to hear what you have to say about that.
I read a book, this woman writer, it's called Tales of a Female Nomad, and it is what it sounds like. It's just a girl traveling as her lifestyle, and she introduced me to this concept of a favor bank and like the world being like a favor bank. So pretty much you allow people to do favors for you because it allows them to put in a deposit, and then later in time, like you could pull out a deposit. Like I feel like we are all more interconnected than we accredit ourselves to be. And being good to others is being good to yourself.
Beautiful. Well, Teresa, thank you so much for taking time to share your voice today.
Thank you for creating this platform where I can.
Thanks for listening. And if you think this is worth listening to, please subscribe, share, and leave a review. Be kind to each other, listen to each other, and let's stop being separated by our differences.
I don't want to be an army.